You should be ashamed at your age and still so clumsy. It seems you still don't know how to tie your shoelaces. You had to be your mother's son. What a misfortune.
Why can't you be like the neighbor's son? You would give us much less trouble if you were more pleasant and cheerful.
That was bad enough, but when my son began to cry because they were being mean to him, my father-in-law crossed the line. He stormed over to my son and slapped him as hard as he could. I always considered myself a fortunate person. I grew up in a loving family with good financial stability, where I never lacked anything. I was able to study what I liked and even travel wherever I wanted. Once I became an adult, I even had the fortune of marrying the person I thought was the love of my life, although things wouldn't end up being as I initially imagined. Gareth, whom I met in college and who ended up becoming my husband, was a wonderful individual. We both studied administration and finances, went to the same parties, and ultimately enjoyed the same hobbies, thus sharing similar interests. On the day of the wedding, I was ecstatic, thinking that another one of my dreams was finally going to come true, joining forever with this individual who had brought so much joy into my life. And yes, for a brief period of time, I was right. Gareth was chivalrous, very attentive to everyday matters, constantly encouraging me to give my best in every situation. His parents also welcomed me into their home with open arms, affirming that from the day I put on the wedding ring, I'd also become one of their children and would be treated as such. It was perfect for a few months until it wasn't anymore.
Girl, have you remembered to sweep the house? Guests are coming this afternoon, and we can't allow the house to be a mess.
Weren't you going to take care of that? I've been preparing lunch all morning. I haven't had time to do anything else yet.
Are you implying that an older person like me should do the work that is your responsibility as a housewife? Gareth would be very disappointed if I told him.
I didn't say that. It's just that I can't do everything. A little help wouldn't hurt me. But my mother-in-law never listened to reason, no matter how much help I asked for or how desperate I appeared. Her excuses were always the same, ever since we had the misfortune of moving into her house. As the wife of her only son, my duty was to cook for everyone, keep the house clean, and take care of the children. My personal aspirations regarding work were irrelevant to her. In fact, since my twins were born, I was forced to take long breaks from the office, not to rest from that employment routine, but because I was overwhelmed with chores to do at home, without any help, as my in-laws tended to assign me more responsibilities than they should have, playing the invalids every time I dared to ask them for the slightest favor. Gareth, who when we were newlyweds and living on our own, shared household tasks with me, now confined himself to a routine where he came and went from his own job, doing nothing productive at home and even ignoring the constant abuses from his parents towards me.
Don't you think you're exaggerating? My parents adore you. They're very happy that you're part of the family. Perhaps if they demand a lot from you, it's because they know you're a smart and capable woman, and they trust that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to.
No, that's not it. At first, I thought it might be that, but it's not normal for them to ask me for a favor, and if I refuse to do it, they blackmail or insult me, saying I'm a bad wife.
It's true that my parents can be a bit intense, but they don't mean any harm.
The other day I had to go do some last-minute shopping because your father insisted it was urgent. And I asked your mother to watch the pot in the meantime. Not only did your mother not pay attention, but when the food burned and I returned, she blamed me for not being present when I was needed.
Don't worry about it. That's just how they are. They calm down later and apologize.
And yes, it was true that when they were calmer, they apologized, occasionally even giving me small gifts to make up for their previous outbursts. But one didn't have to be very intelligent to notice a pattern. My in-laws were people who, although they came from humble backgrounds, believed themselves to be the elite among all humanity, and anyone who wasn't them or didn't agree with them was destined to be trampled upon. They started with some hurtful words and blackmail here and there with me, but over the years, their behavior towards me became increasingly unsustainable, with daily arguments about how little I was worth and how lucky I was to have married someone like Gareth. Initially, I endured it all for the sake of my children, so they could have a normal childhood. But my in-laws also didn't seem to have consideration for their grandchildren, as at the slightest mistake from them, they didn't miss the opportunity to humiliate them, telling them that any mistake they made was caused by their bad blood. Because, as they saw it, I was the black sheep in that house. and therefore, my children were also tainted by my same evil. We should move to our own apartment.
No. Why? Don't you like it here? The house is big enough for everyone, and it's close to the kids' school.
The situation is untenable. If I can't have some privacy to do things my way without your parents constantly judging me, I prefer divorce. I thought Gareth would eventually support me, but that wasn't the case. He sided with his parents. If he saw any abuse from their side, he preferred to pretend nothing was happening, that it was me who was making a mountain out of a molehill. The last straw came during a family event in the backyard when I caught my in-laws mocking their grandchildren in front of all our guests. The reason? One of my children had fallen while playing, something normal for a 5-year-old, and my in-laws thought it was a good opportunity to remind everyone of how useless he was.
You should be ashamed at your age and still so clumsy. It seems you still don't know how to tie your shoelaces. You had to be your mother's son. What a misfortune.
Why can't you be like the neighbor's son? You would give us much less trouble if you were more pleasant and cheerful.
That was bad enough, but when my son began to cry because they were being mean to him, my father-in-law crossed the line. He stormed over to my son and slapped him as hard as he could. Everyone at the event gasped but didn't do anything. I quickly rushed over to make sure my son was okay and saw that he was just terrified by what just happened.
There, now you actually have something to cry about. Get your children under control and teach them to not embarrass us so much. Such filthy little things they are, and so very disappointing as well.
I had enough. That same day, I ended up leaving with the children to my own apartment, resumed my career as a businesswoman, and founded my new business. It was tough at the beginning, with all the indecision and anxiety caused by so many years of submitting to the dictates of that toxic family. But gradually, I found myself again. I received help from my parents, and after about 3 years, I was finally able to be happy again after so long. My children were safe, in a more appropriate environment for their growth, and the business was making more profits than ever. I enjoyed having financial stability and the freedom to do whatever I wanted with my own money, without needing to explain myself to anyone. And then one day, I received an unexpected visit from Gareth and my father-in-law.
We need help. My wife has been diagnosed with a very serious illness. If we don't gather the money for the operation, she'll most likely die. If you could do us the favor of lending us some money to cover the expenses, we would appreciate it.
And how would you show your appreciation exactly? There's nothing I want from you. If I lend you the money, all I expect is for you to pay me back when your situation stabilizes.
How dare you want to charge back what we asked you for as a favor? What an ingrate. After all we did for you, welcoming you into our home as if you were our own daughter.
More threats and insults followed under Gareth's gaze, who never raised his voice to defend me at any moment. But I didn't give in. It was a pity that my mother-in-law was going through that health problem, but I had no obligation to help her after how they treated me. So instead of succumbing to their mistreatment and giving them what they demanded, I simply advised and recommended them to sell their property to cover the necessary expenses. They were outraged, as the house was the only valuable asset they owned. But when they realized that those words were the only help I was willing to offer, they had to relent.
How dare she make these demands? She has no consideration for a sick person. I always said it. She doesn't care about what happens to us. We should sue her somehow.
A lawsuit had no grounds, and no matter how much they complained, everyone knew they had no choice but to accept my terms. My mother-in-law was able to undergo the surgery, but rather than selling their house, they chose to borrow the money from some people that were involved in organized crime. I knew that it was a bad decision as they would never be able to pay the criminals back, but my ex-husband and ex-in-laws were so short-sighted. My ex-husband, although he also worked, had never had a well-paying enough job to afford the lifestyle his family was leading. I realized this then. It seems that when I lived with them, besides treating me like their servant and making me do all the household chores, they were using the money I earned from my job to indulge themselves. My mother-in-law recovered, yes, but the price was high. Between their wasteful nature and the fact that my ex-husband didn't make enough money to cover their lifestyle, bills, and now the loan. They were forced to sell their properties, but only after having been paid a visit by the loan sharks. Each time they saw them, The criminals would beat up my ex-husband and ex-father-in-law, and promising that they would continue to do so until they finally paid them back for what they had borrowed with a great deal of interest. What was worse for them, though, was having to admit to the entire neighborhood that they didn't have enough money or power to sustain themselves. As for me, I was able to continue my successful career, while my ex-husband and his parents had to start renting in a modest neighborhood, struggling to rebuild that facade of a perfect family they had always worked so hard to show publicly. I continued to progress on my own, in the company of my children and the people who truly appreciated me, thus closing a dark period of my life with the promise that better things would come. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories. For